Welcome one and all. I am Lynn Lucas. I'm with the early childhood team at Children at Risk, and I am here with Kim Coffrin, who is the Executive Director of Early Childhood Education at Children at Risk. And we are very happy to be with you this afternoon to talk about the state of early childhood in Texas for our April 2026 Texas tour. We look forward to sharing information with you every time we get to meet. And we always have a few new things to share, and this time is no exception. Our time together will be split into three sections. So I will escort us through the quality section. Kim will escort us through the access section, where we'll talk about childcare deserts. And then Kim will also escort us through the policy section. We love to have engagement from you, and so we encourage you to come off mute, make comments, ask questions, or put things in the chat. And in addition, we also will have at the end of each section a Zoom poll, and we ask that you engage with those. After the poll is done, we'll pull it up on the screen, and then we can have a conversation about your thoughts on the poll. Our mission at Children at Risk is to serve as a catalyst for change to improve the quality of life for children through strategic research, public policy analysis, education, collaboration, and advocacy. And we appreciate the work that you do in all of those areas as well. Here's the rest of our early childhood team. They do work both in front of and behind the scenes, and we could not do it without them or without you. So thank you for being here today and for all of your efforts. If you're not already a part of the Prenatal to 3 Collaborative, we encourage you to come on board. You can use this QR code to find the newsletter, the sign up for the newsletters. We have a quarterly meeting every quarter throughout the year. We're focusing on sunset recommendations, interim charges, and preparations for the 90th legislative session. So we'd love to have you engage with that work. We will be sharing after our time together. You'll get a follow-up email. There will be a lot of resources on there, including a copy of the slide deck. And so if there's information on here you want to make sure you get a copy of, or QR codes that you can't quite grab quickly enough, no worries. You'll receive all of that in a follow-up. So let's talk about quality. Your workforce board has a certain amount of dollars every year that are to be spent on quality. And so our quality expenditures are through the Texas Rising Star system, Texas's quality rating scale system. And this shows us, it's a side-by-side look at board calendar year 2023 and board calendar year 2024, which ended in September of 2025. So if you can keep all that a little bit in your head. But this shows the 2023 to 2024 differences in how the workforce board and how Cameron Workforce Board chose to utilize those funds. And so the red column is 23, the gray is 24. And you can see that in the 2023 year, 70% of the quality dollars were invested in Texas Rising Star. And the following year in 2024, that amount goes to 61%. Now, something to remember about the 2023 to 2024 years is just that in 24, that's when it became mandatory that all programs that receive subsidies also participate and engage with Texas Rising Star. And so between 23 and 24, there was a lot of effort and engagement kind of toward that work. So there were some adjustments made there. It looks like there was an adjustment in the infant and toddler category as well, meaning that your workforce board area really looked at the need and said, wow, we want to make sure that we invest some additional dollars in infant and toddler care. That seems here to have been maybe a priority for the year. And then there was a little bit more spent in the area of professional development. Do note that in order for anything to show up on this particular graph, it needed to have represented at least 1% of the overall quality dollars. So just because you don't see something on this graph doesn't mean that there wasn't anything at all spent in that area. It just didn't equal at least 1%. Here, we're able to look at the comparison between the 2024 board calendar year, your workforce board, Cameron, alongside the average state expenditure and quality. And this is interesting to look at because there really are some differences here. For example, we see that that your workforce board area invested a lot more in infant toddler focused items and areas than the statewide did as well. Professional development's pretty similar. Cameron, you guys, your workforce board spent a lot more in the Texas Rising Star supports. What are Texas Rising Star supports, you wonder? We will talk about the subcategories in just a minute, so you'll get to see what some of those are. You can see the rest of the expenditures there. And the other category, this is interesting because the Cameron Workforce Board area did not invest in the other category, where we saw most other workforce boards did invest a lot more in this category. And statewide, you can see 35% of quality investments were spent in that category. And we'll talk about what things are in that category in just a minute. Here we're able to see what your workforce board spent money on. That is in red, alongside the other workforce boards. So all 28 workforce boards are noted here. Each of these icons represents a category. And so you can see Cameron down here. The star is TRS supports, professional development. The rattle is infant and toddler investments, and the teddy bear is that. And the teddy bear is, and the teddy bear is that other. Again, it's showing up here, the other. So that just means that some investment was made in the other category. It just didn't equal at least 1%. So it didn't end up on that other graph, but there was some amount that was invested there. Now let's talk about some of those subcategories and and the way that your community invested in those. This is looking at TRS supports as a broader category, and you can see some of the subcategory potentials include equipment, materials, and resources, curriculum, outdoor learning, which is typically equipment, some additional TRS mentor salary supports, family engagement, and TechPeds SME. TechPeds SME stands for Texas Early Childhood Professional Development System, subject matter expert. It's a mouthful there. We know that most workforce boards did invest some in this area, even if it's not reflected here. It probably just is a matter of how things were coded. And that's because when it became mandatory that programs that receive subsidies participated in Texas Rising Star, it also became mandatory that all programs engage with TechPeds, because Texas Rising Star requires that. And there's an administrative lift to make that happen. And so there was some additional investment to try to support that possibility. Again, we can see all 28 workforce boards represented here, Cameron in red, and your TRS supports were largely invested in the area of the TRS mentor salaries. And so some additional support was needed there. A very purposeful investment to make sure that your community had what it needed in order to onboard and support all of those programs that were coming on. You can see that there's a wide variety. Some workforce boards invested more diversely, and other workforce boards really focused in on one area like you all did. And so that's a reflection of each community really paying attention to what the needs are in your area. So this is an opportunity for you to ask yourself, does this make sense to me in terms of how we invested in our area? Have I seen the investments reflected in this way? Are there gaps somewhere? And that sort of thing. So now we can look at infants and toddlers, which is super important for your area because you invested a lot. That was one of the biggest changes between one year and the next. And your infant toddler investments were in the area of curriculum and materials in infant toddler classes, and also in professional development, which is great. A lot of times you see those things come together because the curriculum and the materials and the professional development should all go together. So way to go, Cameron Workforce Board. It's really good to see that. And then you can see right alongside the other workforce boards kind of how people chose to invest in those areas. Professional development, there are a lot of ways to do professional development, and each community has the opportunity to decide what's going to be most needed and the best way to invest for you for that year. Cameron, local workforce board, you've invested in general trainings for your area. We also know that there was some focus on infant toddler professional development, like we saw on the previous slide. Other potential places to have spent those dollars include conferences, CDA support, Texas Rising Star orientation, college scholarships, and apprenticeships. There is that other category, and you all did invest some in that area in pre-K partnerships. Again, not a bunch compared to the overall amount that of quality dollars that you had, but there was an investment made in that area. Many of the other workforce boards invested in the area of wage supplements. Those could have been retention bonuses or recognition once wage investment once reaching a certain star level. And then childcare management systems was another potential way to have spent those dollars. So quality in terms of Texas Rising Star level, we can see the difference between the 2023 and 2024 year in your area. Gray represents 2023, the red is 24. And we can see that the biggest increase was in the Texas Rising Star 2 and Texas Rising Star 4 levels. Quite a bit of a leap there from 23 to 24 in that highest star level 4. Some potentially some new ones coming in here at Texas Rising Star 2, and a little bit of a decrease in Texas Rising Star 3. That doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. That could mean that a lot of these move from Texas Rising Star 3 to Texas Rising Star 4. As you know, anytime you have an assessment, you can move up or down or stay the same. We do know that a lot of folks were coming on board that year, and so it could be that a bunch of people came on board and went straight into that TSR 4 level. Overall, we do know that there was an increase in the number of programs that are Texas Rising Star. You can dig into a more detailed analysis of this information by finding the Paving the Way to Quality report, where there's an executive summary that looks at this in a more detailed level, both statewide and also for your area. There's a pull-out report for each local workforce board. So not only can you look at Cameron Workforce Board's information, but you can also look at anybody else's in case you're curious. Sometimes it's interesting to look at someone, your neighbors who's closest to you, or other times it might be if there's a community that's really similar to, or even very different than you are. It's sometimes interesting to see, hey, what did they do with their dollars? So now we want to hear from you. I'm going to pull a poll up here and ask for you to take a moment to engage with this poll. It's going to ask you of these barriers, which do you think is the biggest barrier to the least barrier in terms of early childhood quality in your community? Once we get a few responses, we'll share the results with everybody. By the way, you're also welcome to put questions in the chat or ask out loud at this time. So Kim, what are your thoughts about one year to the next of some of this quality information?
Yeah, this is our second year of doing that, paving the way, looking at how workforce boards are using their quality dollars across the state. And the first year was, we were going in blind, not knowing what we were going to get and what the analysis would show. This year, it was really interesting to watch how boards shifted based on what they did the previous year, what the community needs. One could argue if you spend a lot of money on curriculum one year, you don't need to do the same thing next year. You may do more on training professional development. So if you had a big push of your TRS and they're in the system, they may do less on TRS supports and more fine tuning. So I think that part, it was really interesting. And I think the other thing is just that other category. We saw that big jump in that 35% across the state. As more workforce boards are thinking about how can they support compensation and what role can they play, and doing the wage supplements or the bonuses when they achieve Texas Rising Star credit or stand classification, or when they get their so much professional development or their degrees. That's not gonna fix our compensation problem, but it's gonna help, and the more we can do around that, and workforce boards recognizing their role in that. So I think that's an interesting thing to watch across the state.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. We'll take a look here at some just like early quick responses to that poll that we just took. And you can think about if you agree or disagree with some of these responses. Like all of the others so far, and actually you guys we're wrapping up with y'all, and then we have our statewide session tomorrow. But we can see that quality, that salary and benefit levels is the biggest barrier, and you're not alone in that at all. We can also see that coming in next as the biggest barrier is the quality level of applicants, followed by quality or access to professional development. So those things definitely, we could see how those maybe would come hand in hand. And so the focus on infant toddler professional development and some of those supports might be responsive to some of the needs in your community. And fairly tied, but maybe a little bit more on the overburdens with administrative paperwork side. There's that as a barrier, and coming in at the rear is licensing related issues, turnover of representatives, and access to information. So any questions or comments about those things or anything else that was covered in the quality section? All right, then I will hand it over to Kim to talk about childcare deserts data.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lynn. Super excited to share data with y'all. And like Lynn said, you guys are our last stop. We have a statewide tour tomorrow that just goes over things generically across the state, but nothing that we are going to share today. Everything we share today, you will get tomorrow, just without the Cameron County. So if you came today, you don't need to come tomorrow. It's really for people who just have missed the local stops. So but we've been tracking childcare deserts since 2017, and we are able to, and over those last 9 years, we've been able to really think about those first three designations. So really around childcare deserts of, the generic overarching classification is a zip code where at least there are at least 30 children under the age of 6, where the demand is 3 times greater than the supply. So there's 3 times more children than there are licensed childcare seats. And so that's what a generic zip code is. And so when we compare all the licensed capacity across the state and look at all the children under the age of 6 where all available parents in the home are working or going to school, that's how we then look at those ratios. If it's 3 times, then it's deemed that desert. We then drill down a little bit narrower, and look at our local our low income families, and look at how same group of children, but just meet the families that meet the 200% federal poverty line, and where are the subsidy seats, and where are those deserts, right? So then we drill down that. The next level is our Texas Rising Star level, and this is really looking at our quality programs and where are those deserts. So big picture, everybody, then we look at low income, and then we look at quality. We added a fourth designation this year for the first time, where we're really looking at chronic childcare deserts. And this is a zip code that has been a desert for at least 3 consecutive years. We've been tracking this since 2017. We're now far enough away from the dip in pandemic that we saw during the pandemic. We lost a bunch of childcare in 21, and then they shot way back up in 22. So now we're far enough away from that and getting a little kind of where we were pre-pandemic to really able to look and see where are those communities, what's really happening in those communities. So this is our overall childcare. So if you look on the left-hand side, under with the gray column, that is statewide data, and on the right, that is all Cameron County specifically. You can see across the state. We have about 995,000 seats for that 0 to 5 population. That's up slightly, about 3,000 kiddos, or not kiddos, 3,000 seats across the state. And our deserts went from 420 to 413. So, you know, bird's eye view, we're doing good. Last year we lost like 75,000 seats. This year we gained 3,000. So like, okay, we're kind of leveling out. Maybe this is where we're going to stay for a while. But we also know there's more nuances to that. We still have 413 deserts. And so we know that the supply isn't always where it should be and where it's at. In Cameron County, you guys have 9,400 childcare seats in your county, and you have a zip code. You have 5 childcare deserts in that piece. So you decreased your capacity about 600 seats, and decreased your zip code about by 1. So there was by your deserts by 1. It was 6 last year. Now it's 5. So when we look at but when we drill down to our subsidy, again, we're looking at across the state, we have about 149,000 seats. But you look at those deserts jumped from that 413 number to 884. So more than doubled when we look at low income families. So low income families have a much harder time finding childcare that's accessible to them than our childcare than our higher income, middle income families. When we look at Cameron County's subsidies, you guys are at 3,300 subsidy seats. That's down just a skosh from last year. And your zip codes are at your subsidy deserts. You have 7 zip codes are deserts. When we think about the deserts and the numbers, right, we're comparing those two items and that ratio between the two. But there's nuances within those numbers. And so when we really look at, we have to look, did the supply go up, or did the increase of children go up or down? And what combination did that? And what we really kind of dug in is there's kind of 3 things happening. There are some deserts that uh, there were some zip codes that were not designated as deserts last year because they didn't have 30 children in them, but this year they do. And so they're now a desert, where last year they didn't have 30 children in them. And so that's one reason. Another reason is supply outpaced, or the demand outpaced the supply. So both grew or both decreased, but they just had a difference in the rate of that. Or we saw supply increase in communities that weren't deserts. So we saw supplies, we increased capacity for subsidy or overall childcare in communities that already had enough childcare. So we count them in their overall number, but it doesn't help us change the desert pieces it. And the third and final reason is really around just loss of programs. We know we lost childcare programs this year. And depending on where those happen and what communities, that can really make a difference in those desert numbers. The same is true for Texas Rising Star. We increased our numbers of Texas Rising Star, which makes sense because we had more programs get into Texas Rising Star. So across the region, you guys have about almost 3,300 seats in Texas Rising Star, and 7 deserts. And again, that number on the left, that 132,000 and 938, both are up from last year as well. When we look at chronic for the first time, we're really looking at, again, which zip codes communities have been a desert for 3 years. And why that's really important is if you think about those first 5 years of a child's life, if that family has lived in a chronic desert for 3 out of those 5 years. That's a big chunk of their development that they are unable to have access to high quality early learning that really will help set them up for success in kindergarten and third grade and later research. We are all early childhood people, and we know the importance of those first 5 years. So one, it really affects the child's development and or can, and two, it can also really affect the family's trajectory on their own economic growth. We know when families have consistent childcare that's reliable and affordable and that they can count on, they're more likely to have more successes in their own jobs. They can take that promotion. They can pick up more hours. They have a bigger trajectory. The trajectory is going up on providing for their family, and so we know both things are true. Oh, this does say Dallas. The data is correct. Thanks, Wendy. But I did check the data, but we failed to change the title, so we will fix that. Thanks for catching that. We'll fix that before we send it out. Um, so both things are true. So this is really just looking at your chronic deserts. Looking at we have 1 out of your 5 overall deserts are a chronic in the overall, 2 out of your 7, and 3 out of 7 for TRS. And so we're really wanting to, this information is good for me to know, and for me to understand. But for y'all, when I show you the map, you can really dig into those counties, or excuse me, those zip codes, and really understand. You might look at that zip code and go, "Oh, yep, that's what's happening over in that community, and that's why this is happening over there." You will know that because you live in the community, where I don't necessarily know that. So we hope that this information isn't just good information for us to have, but it is good information for you guys to really dig in and understand. When we look at the longitudinal lens of over the last 5 years, we can kind of see where that trend is. 21 is when we were in the middle of the pandemic and we still had lost a lot of programs and seats. And so that top line is the overall seats available for children. So this is the number of seats available per 100 children of working families. So for 100 children, we have 86 childcare seats available for them across the state. That's pretty good, right? We know not all families want formalized licensed childcare, so 86 out of 100. If that was true for all children across the state, I would be a happy camper. But we know that's not true. We know that it's uneven in where those seats are, and that's why we have the deserts. And also, when we look at that middle line, which is the subsidy childcare line, we know that that's not true for our low-income families. We have about 26 seats per 100 children for low-income families and 23 seats for our Texas Rising Star programs. Subsidy and Texas Rising Star are getting closer, which is great. And we anticipated that to happen with living into mandatory Texas Rising Star. But there's a big gap there from where we are overall. And that's the gap that we really want to close. We also get excited about this graph, or this is one of my favorite graphs, is really showing you the number of programs that participate in Texas Rising Star and the number of children participating, receiving care at in a Texas Rising Star program. So across Cameron County, 93% of your programs that accept subsidy are in Texas Rising Star. They have got their certification. State average is 75%. So kudos to y'all on making sure that you're above average, Cameron County, and got more and more programs into the system. And that's maybe where it is. Like, we'll see how this all works, because we always know there's going to be some type of rotation of new programs coming in. So kudos to you. The other one that I get excited about is the percentage of children I always do this. I always forget one fact about the providers. It's also important to know, and I don't remember where Cameron County was, but before mandatory TRS, before we made that a requirement across the state, we were sitting about 30% of our providers were in Texas Rising Star. So kudos to you, to all of you who work in that system, mentors, assessors, providers, all of it. We have done a lot of work over the last several years to embrace that quality program, and it really is making a difference for children, because in Cameron County, 96% of the children that are receiving a scholarship from Workforce Board are in a Texas Rising Star quality program. And that is fantastic news that all those kiddos are in a high quality program, are on there and improving every day. And that is such a good thing. We know our tax dollars are going to programs that are really helping children. Like state average is at 83.4%. So again, you guys are above average, and congratulations on that work. Um, the other thing that I've been tracking is our family child care providers. I know we've had many conversations about this down in Brownsville when we've been there in the past several years. Something we continue to track. They have not bounced back from the pandemic. We're still at a 22% decrease of family child care providers since before the pandemic. We had a slight increase this year, which is great, but not enough to really beat that bounce back. So knowing that they are an integral part of our ECE landscape. They're an important choice for families to make, to understand, knowing for them to be able to understand that they are great for infants and toddlers, that when families want a smaller environment, they're also great for families that need non-traditional hours, early morning, late in the evenings, or on weekends. And so we just want to make sure we're rising family child care providers up to the top as well. And then the last thing before I take you to the map, when we look at all the available subsidy and the number of kids, we're looking at 1 in 4, about 26% of our low-income children under the age of 6 are receiving scholarships for childcare. So we know that's not nearly enough of where it needs to be when we think about that population, right? We can do better than 25%, 26% of the population to serve, but we need more money in the system to serve those children, right? We got to have more money to open up those scholarships. So with that, I am going to ask Linda stop sharing for just a second, and I am going to share the map. We added a couple things this year. Okay, so this is the on our website. If you go into research and there's a childcare desert map link, and you can just click on that, and that will get you to that landing page, and then you can click on view map. So this is what the dashboard will look like. We added this feature here in this red box to the right, where it has 263. That's the number of chronic deserts that we have across the state. And then we also added this toggle over here. You can see as you look at the map that the deserts that are outlined in that thicker font are those are our chronic childcare deserts. But if you click up here in this teal button, you can toggle it off, and then you don't see the chronic desert. So depending on what you're looking at and what you're wanting to do. You can also look at view childcare providers. This gives you a heat map of the state. So move the state so you can see Texas. So you can see that this is looking at the different programs, and you can toggle all the different things that you want down here. CSCFP, not CFCFP, all the different filters that you can play with. Oh, let me go back up here. But I also wanted to show you, so if we do workforce board, here you can choose by workforce board, you can choose by county. There's also Texas state and house district zip codes. So you can really drill down into that. For you guys are at a workforce board that is your county, but we're going to do Cameron. So here is your map. Zoom out just a bit. And up here, then you can see that you've got 94,000 seats. The numbers go across, and then you can look at your subsidy and with your Texas Rising Star. So you can kind of see where all those are at there. Then you can also look at your overtime. That gives you your map compared to Texas. And then you are also able to download the data as a whole entity, and then you can filter as well. So if you really want to dig into what is happening in certain zip codes, you can really play around with that. So, like I said, we get excited about the deserts. We get more excited when communities use them to really dig into what's happening in certain areas of your community. We are super thrilled with that piece. So feel free to use that and holler if you have questions. Lynn put up another poll for you. This is really talking about the barriers to access childcare. So again, if you want to take a few minutes and rank those, um, and then we'll share those results before we dive into our last section. And feel free if you have questions or comments about the data. Here we go. Starting to get some responses in. All right, so here's, oh, yeah, okay. Here are the responses. Um, so, no surprise, cost of families, right? For low income families, it's hard to find afford childcare, and for or even our middle income families, it's hard to afford childcare, right? So, that is no surprise, and that is directly tied to number letter C, which C and D are right there in competition with each other. But we know the cost of doing business also right directly applies to the cost that we have to, excuse me, pass on to families, and how do we make it more affordable to them. And then of course location, not enough staff. Yep. So I tell people all the time with 2.3 million children under the age of 6, we're not fighting for children, we're fighting for funding and staff. There's enough kids to go around if we had the staffing and the funds to pay for them. So that's part of those pieces. Um, so great. All right. We'll stop there. And again, feel free to come off mute or drop a question in the chat. All right, well, we're going to dig into our last section. So this is really thinking about our advocacy and what do we do with all this information and what's happening. We're in our interim, what we call our interim session. This is the year before, in between our legislative sessions. Uh, so the legend goes is that we have a every other year because it takes too long to get from to Austin from Brownsville and El Paso by horse. I don't think anyone's traveling by horse anymore, but we're still in this biennium legislature, which is fine. But there's lots happening during this time frame. So kind of to level set us. On where we are at. So based on our childcare deserts, 47% of all of our zip codes across Texas are deserts for low income children. Too many. It's hard to find care. We know it's hard to find childcare for all families, but it's even harder for low income families. We also know childcare is expensive. We families are spending between 10 or 50% of their income when we know the recommendations is to for them to pay about 7%. So again, a long way from where reality is. And then our ECE workforce is 6 times more likely to live in poverty than our elementary and middle school teachers, and 43% of our educators' households participate in one or more form of public assistance. So that kind of levels kind of where we are. I have used our tricycle before and like to continue to use it because it kind of just, one, it's fun and it helps explain the complexity of our early childhood ecosystem. So our childcare deserts look at brick and mortar. They count capacity, right? Those are based off of capacity. They're not based off of a program that is maybe licensed for 150, but choose to run at 115 because they have smaller group sizes and ratios. So it's truly just looking at brick and mortar. And we need brick and mortar. We need places for children to participate, to play, and to gather. But if we don't also look at the educators of this building, which is our front tire, we can have all the brick and mortar we want, but if we don't have educators, those classrooms are going to sit empty. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about the educator pipeline, thinking about how are we uh, compensating our educators to make sure they want to go into this field. and that they when they get here they can stay. How are we giving them the professional development and their training around it? And then we can't forget about that third wheel. If we have the beautiful brick and mortar and we're paying our educators what they deserve, which family's going to be able to afford that, right? So doesn't mean we don't make it more affordable on families on the backs of our educators, but we've got to rethink that system and rethink how those things are in balance with each other. When those three things are balanced, then we really have that tricycle that is aligned and can move forward. And the thing that's one of the things that's keeping us aligned is our rules and regs. We have lots of rules and regs in Texas, from minimum standards, Texas Rising Star, and a food program, um, to pre-K guidelines and the lot. And so, how do we keep those aligned to make sure that our tricycle is again in a full functioning tricycle? And then we've got the funding, which is our pedals. We can't move forward without funding. We can't serve more children without funding. We can't figure out how to braid and blend between public schools and childcare if we don't have funding and the mechanisms to do that. So we got to make sure that funding piece is part of that ecosystem and talked about. And of course, each of us is in the driver's seat around that. So what does that framework look like for Texas? So here is we are divided into 6 state agencies right now. Obviously, we have Health and Human Services, which is where our child care regulations sit. It's also where 211 is. It's where our early childhood intervention for our kiddos with special needs sits. Lots of programs over there in Health and Human Services. Then we have Department of Family Protective Services, right? This is our Child Abuse and Neglect State Intake Office, foster care, kinship care. Department of State Health Services, maternal child health is there, Help Me Grow, but also our immunization tracker, which is what we keep track of all kiddos in child care and are they up to date on their immunizations and making sure those are being accountable for. And then if you decide to take subsidy, you're working with the Texas Workforce Commission because they have the subsidy program, the scholarships, and they have the QRIS program, which is our Texas Rising Star. And then if you have enough kids in subsidy, you probably are going to be in the food program. And so how do you make sure that, so with the department, and that's with the Department of Ag, so making sure that you're in line with those standards as well. And then if you have a pre-K partnership or have a kiddo with special needs that is older than the age of 3, you're dealing with your ISD and TEA. So as a provider, as a family, as a teacher, you are dealing with multiple state agencies that may or may not be telling you the same thing or different things at any given time. Um, so what is that? So with all of that in mind, a couple things happened last legislative session. 2 bills were passed, and then the Sunset Commission is also going on. So House Bill 117 is established the governor's task force on the governance of early childhood. It's really thinking about all those 6 agencies and how can they work better together. What does the new system potentially look like? How do we, and without just rearranging the chairs on the deck of a sinking ship, how are we really making it better for children and families? House Bill 4903 is the Quad Agency for Child Care Initiative. It's really focused on those regs, the regulations of what is said at minimum standards compared to Texas Rising Star, compared to TEA, and how are those regs really aligning or not aligning to make it less difficult? So how can we streamline those regulations? And then the Sunset Review Commission. This is a standing, ongoing Sunset Review Commission. They rotate all state agencies every 10 years and basically do an audit. They kind of look at what's your mission? Are you meeting that mission? What's going well? Where can be improvements made? And then make that determination of what changes do we want to incorporate. And this year we have 4 out of our 6 agencies aligned for Sunset Review Commission. So these 2 major bills and Sunset Review Commission for 4 of our state agencies is a lot going on. I tease that we have either all the stars have aligned or we have made the gods mad, and I'm not sure which one it is because we've got a lot going on. So here's a quick look of the different all the different things with all the different state agencies that is touching. And then in preparation of that, we did a survey last fall, and thank you for those of you that filled it out. That really was looking at asking providers, what is your feedback? We knew we had state or Sunset Review. We knew the governor's task force would be getting up and going. We knew the quad agency was happening. So we wanted to hear from you. 1,300 providers and parents across the state filled that out, representing all 28 local workforce boards. So thank you for those of you in Cameron County to filled that out. And then we also did our Texas tour. We were down with you in October last year, trying to really understand what's happening in the community. And so we took the survey results and all the conversations from our Texas tour and combined those into recommendations. So the first recommendation is really around, oh, sorry, here's the breakdown of who was what filled out the survey. Here's the recommendations. And so one of the things we had 6 overall recommendations, and we know the devil's in the details of what should happen or what all this will look like. But one of the things we heard from providers is just rules are constantly changing. They're inconsistent rollouts. Minimum standards, it's with so many minimum standards, it's hard to know what's what. And childcare regulations representatives interpret the rules differently. What children that are in licensed childcare have to follow these rules. Children that are in a public school pre-K program have to follow these rules. And so providers are really asking for more coordinated regulatory structure as well as agency and cross-agency training to really understand what those conflicts are. We heard one of the things we heard was Texas Rising Star wants real materials in the classroom, right? That's what's best for children is real materials as much as possible. But some licensing reps were like, nope, those are dangerous, can't have real materials. And so you've got two conflicting people telling you different things that you both that you as a provider are responsible for. And so how do you slice that, right? And is that really written wrong in the standards, or is it really a training and interpretation? And where is that piece of things? The second one is efficiency, improving the efficiency and review around the local workforce development boards to better align resources to meet today's population and community needs and economic realities. Workforce boards were developed 30 years ago. Um, uh, I wasn't around 30 years ago in Texas. I got here just at, but those were developed 30 years ago, and are they the right format to meet the needs of today's communities? The next one was really around application and streamlining. This is really thinking about um, the family's perspective and having one application and one point of contact aligning eligibility. Some eligibility is as of April 1st, some of it September 1st, some of it uses the federal poverty line levels of uh, eligibility, some use the state medium income. So how can we align that and where are those opportunities that we can align that? Really trying to make it clear for families of where they can access that information. We really want to make it available as seamlessly as possible. The next one is really around regulatory and implementation alignment. Again, really thinking about excess paperwork and those eligibility requirements. I talked to a provider a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "I'm filling out my 4th cybersecurity documentation for her state agencies to document what they do to protect their computers and data, et cetera." She's like, "Can't this just be one form?" So that's an example of that happened just a couple weeks ago. Different inspectors tell us different things. This is where you get one licensing rep that says one thing, you get a new one, and it's like, oh, nope, that doesn't work anymore. But the rules didn't change. So just really trying to really build on that consistency within the state agency as well as across state agencies. There's just a lot of standards. So is there a way to streamline those? And really thinking about how can we have a licensing rep that is or a licensing organization that really is aligned and really supportive and not just punitive, right? But I can really call for questions and to really find out, be supportive in that piece. And then also on background checks, there's lots of confusion around background checks and how can we streamline that process. There's some privacy issues, but how do we overcome those privacy issues and what are some workarounds? Not to negate the privacy piece, but how can we make it more streamlined that's more common sense in that piece? The last two are around The first one is around contract accountability and performance management. So really thinking about um, how can we improve oversight for contracted services to ensure quality performance? No surprise, we've heard a lot of feedback about Texas 3C, which is the payment system for providers. And really, how do we make sure that one of the things we heard from providers is if we're being held accountable by providers, how are local workforce boards, vendors, and the state being accountable for the issues as well. So really, how can we streamline that contracting ability to make sure that we're not doing more damage than we started with? The last one is around access for children with disabilities. Really, how do we improve access for childcare services? We know there is a differential rate for within TWC for children with special needs, but it's not hard. It's not easy to get. It's hard to come by. And so, is there ways that we can really streamline that process? We also know for families. Thanks, Lynn. We also know for families. Uh, it can take a long time to convince them to get their child assessed. So how can we speed up the assessment once they're ready in the ECI or in public school? We also know there is a delay in services from that transition from ECI to public school that isn't supposed to happen but does. So how can we really streamline those processes? So with that, a bill was passed last session, House Bill 2310, that asked TEA, Health and Human Services, and Texas Workforce Commission to come up with a strategic plan focused around children with disabilities. It is open now. It is closes on Sunday. So that link is there. And I think Lynn just dropped it in the chat. So if you could please take a few minutes to fill that out, share it with your networks and ask them to fill it out. We want to make sure we have a good representation across the state. It was a short-lived survey, so we want to get as many surveys and responses as possible that we can. Okay, so I think we've got one more poll, and this is really just asking what out of the recommendations, what thoughts or questions arise, things that gave you pause, things that give you excitement. Is there anything that you would like to add to that? And you can put it in the poll. You could also drop it in the chat or come off mute and just tell us yourself. The pregnant pause. I'm also going to drop the link to TWC is leading the quad agency work. This is the group that is looking at the regulations to see where the duplications are and where are the um, um, contradictory regulations. So they have a new website landing page, and that's housed at TWC. So that's their website. And then TEA is housing the governor's task force. And they also have a new landing page. So this will be the place where you can keep track of if they have an upcoming hearing or if once there is a hearing, uh, the minutes should be there, etc. So those are just good resources for you both to have, for you all to have on that piece. Um, so those are available. The governor's task force has had one meeting. The quad agency has had two. And the other thing important to know is in the next 8 months, the governor's task force, the quad agency, and Sunset Commission will all come up with reports that will go to the legislators with potential ideas for them to things that can change and things that should change. So once we get through the next 8 months, we'll kind of know where those reports stand, and then they will start going through the legislative process once January hits to really understand, and then we'll work through that system of getting a bill through. So we'll see what comes out of the reports first, and how do we inform those, And then once those reports come, then we'll kind of know what kind of legislation we're looking at over the next 6 months um, after January when session starts. A couple more resources for you. This is QR codes. The left is just to our childcare desert map. The middle one is our paving the way, which is the links I dropped in earlier. And then our last one is just to sign up for AECE newsletters to keep you all informed. So those are links for you. We'll copy all the links, all the resources. You'll get a copy of the deck as well as a recording of the presentation in your inbox, either later today or early tomorrow. Um, and with that, and if there's no other questions, we'll let you all go.
Hey Kim, I had a question real quick. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Go
Sorry
ahead, Melissa.
to hold everybody up. House Bill 2310,
Hmm.
will that also focus on like parents getting resources or help when they're looking for childcare for children with disabilities? A lot of times when we're out there doing our community engagement events, we get a lot of parents who have children with disabilities come up to our tables and they have trouble finding childcare.
Hmm.
And it's hard because, we know that, by law they can't be turned away and there's a process, right, for childcare facilities to try to work with the children and offer services. But I know it's also hard for our childcare providers too, right? Because maybe they don't have enough staff or they're not knowledgeable on how to work with children with special care needs, like to the full extent, right? And
Right.
so, I hope that that's something that's being considered with that bill. The childcare centers are being kind of incorporated with that bill because there's such a need for that. There's
Yep.
such a need. Those kiddos also need to be, just mainstreamed into the childcare facilities as well, but also not just place it in there, but also have that support within our childcare facilities as well. So that it can all just flow seamlessly, right?
Yep.
But I don't know if that's going to be part of that bill.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that's why we want, people to fill out that survey so childcare providers can like share their stories, parents can share their stories.
Okay,
I think any of that is to I think that is supposed to be all encompassing of like how do we do this? I know T Texas Workforce Commission is working on a badge for childcare providers who want to be classified as working with children with special needs. So it's a way for parents to know these are the providers in your community that are open to this and have some extra training. So
that's
that's
awesome.
that's in development. But I think that strategic plan is really to help figure out what is the need and how do we get there. So I think that survey will really be helpful to get those words out. So yeah, and everything you said is right on, right? It's hard for parents, it's hard for providers. And so how do we make sure we're giving everybody the supports they need to give the children the supports they need
Yeah.
in those vital years. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to share the survey with my team, so you can count on
Great.
us.
Great. Thanks, Melissa.
Sure.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions? All right, y'all. Well, I hope you get a break from the heat sometime soon in Brownsville. Um, and we will be with you back in October. So we look forward to seeing you all in person, if not in a Zoom near you soon. So be well, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Wendy.
Thanks, Slim. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Sure thing.